At a grand concert hall in New York City, the annual Harmony International Music Competition was in full swing. The audience buzzed with anticipation, and the panel of judges sat upright in sharp suits, their faces a blend of authority and fatigue. Among them sat Victor Hale, a world-renowned pianist known as much for his genius as for his brutal honesty. TV cameras lined the back, ready to capture the next big prodigy. Then, the doors opened. A hush fell as a blind teenage girl, no older than 17, walked carefully onto the stage. She wore a modest pale blue dress, her white cane tapping softly across the polished floor. Her name was Ella. She had no grand entrance, no entourage, only quiet strength etched in every step. She reached the piano, touched the edge, and felt her way to the bench. A slight tremble in her hands betrayed her nerves, but she kept her chin high. The crowd murmured. A few snickers floated through the air. One of the judges sighed audibly, flipping through her notes without interest. Victor Hale leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Then, loud enough for the mic to pick up, he said with a scoff, "We don't have time for charity cases today." The words sliced through the silence like a blade. Laughter, uncomfortable and cruel, rippled through the room. Ella's face turned crimson. She sat frozen, her hands hovering above the keys. The sting of humiliation lingered, but then she took a slow, deep breath. Instead of fleeing, she adjusted her posture, straightened her back, and placed her fingers on the piano with resolve. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. No music had been played yet, but in that moment, everyone could feel it, something deeper was unfolding. Ella's courage radiated from the stage, a quiet rebellion against the mockery and judgment around her. She wasn't just here to perform. She was here to prove that brilliance isn't always dressed in glitter, that worth isn't measured by sight or celebrity. In a room full of noise and ego, her silent strength spoke volumes. Ella took a shaky breath and pressed the first keys. The sound rang out, hesitant and uneven. Her fingers trembled as she searched for the right notes, the melody stuttering under the weight of her nerves. A hush fell, but it wasn't respectful, it was expectant, almost predatory. She knew they were waiting for her to fail. Victor Hale didn't even try to hide his disdain. He leaned forward, brow furrowed in mock concern, before waving his hand dismissively. "Enough. Stop embarrassing yourself." His voice boomed through the hall, amplified by the mic. The words landed like a slap. Laughter broke out in pockets of the audience, sharp, mean, unkind. Some people tried to hide their amusement behind their programs, others didn't bother. Ella's lip quivered as she fought to keep her composure. Her hands dropped to her lap. She reached for her cane blindly, fingers clutching it so hard her knuckles whitened. She began to rise from the bench, heart pounding with shame and fury. It felt like every eye was on her, not with admiration, but pity and mockery. Her throat tightened painfully. She had come all this way to prove herself, and now she could barely see through the tears pressing against her sightless eyes. Then, from the side of the stage, footsteps hurried over. A young staffer named Lena, a production assistant in a simple black headset, rushed to Ella's side. She placed a gentle, steadying hand on Ella's shoulder and bent close so only she could hear. "Don't leave," she whispered fiercely. "Don't let them win." Ella froze. The words sank in like warm light through cold glass. She didn't know this girl, didn't even know what she looked like, but she felt the raw, genuine kindness in her voice. It wasn't pity. It was belief. Ella gripped her cane tighter, swallowing hard, trying to steady her breathing. Around them, the audience waited, restless and dismissive. Victor rolled his eyes, checking his watch. But Ella didn't move to leave. Not yet. She held her ground, blinking back tears, drawing strength from Lena's quiet defiance. In that moment, something small but powerful shifted inside her, the first ember of resolve reignited, refusing to be snuffed out by cruelty. Lena gently guided Ella away from the harsh lights and mocking laughter of the stage. They moved down a quiet corridor, their footsteps muffled on the old carpet. Ella wiped at the tears slipping down her cheeks, her cane tapping softly in the hush. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the shadows where no one could see her humiliation. But Lena didn't let her go. She led her into a small practice room tucked behind the main hall. It was dimly lit, the only sound the distant thump of applause for the next contestant. In the center of the room stood a beautiful grand piano, its polished surface gleaming even in the low light. Ella hesitated at the door, head bowed. She felt broken, humiliated beyond words. But Lena's hand stayed warm and firm on her arm. She guided her to the piano bench and sat beside her for a moment, quiet and patient. Ella sniffed, voice cracking. "I can't do this. Not after that." Lena shook her head and spoke softly but firmly. "Play. No judges. No audience. Just you." The word settled over Ella like a blanket. She exhaled shakily, let her fingers rest on the keys. She sat there in silence, listening to her own heartbeat, the weight of her disappointment pressing down. But slowly, she drew in a deep, calming breath. She began to play. This time, there was no tremor in her hands. The notes emerged clear, rich, and achingly beautiful. The music filled the tiny room like a living thing, haunting, vulnerable, fierce. Every emotion she had buried, fear, shame, hope, poured out through the keys. Her sightless eyes closed. She was somewhere else entirely, a place of music and memory, untouched by cruelty. Lena didn't dare speak. Instead, she pulled out her phone quietly and began recording, knowing the world needed to hear this. Her own eyes shone with tears as she listened, goosebumps prickling along her arms. When Ella finished, her fingers hovering over the final chord, there was only silence. She turned her face toward Lena uncertainly. Lena didn't say anything at first. She just wrapped her arms around her in a fierce hug. Ella tensed for a second, then melted into it, her tears finally falling freely. For the first time that day, she didn't feel mocked or broken. She felt seen. She felt enough. Lena didn't waste any time. That night, she uploaded the recording of Ella's private performance to social media with a simple caption, "This is what they didn't let you hear." Within hours, the video exploded. Comments poured in from around the world. Musicians praising her raw talent, strangers moved to tears by her hauntingly beautiful playing. Hashtags trended. News outlets picked up the story. By morning, the competition organizers were flooded with calls and messages demanding Ella be given another chance. Sponsors threatened to pull out if she wasn't reinstated. Under pressure, and with cameras rolling, they had no choice but to invite her back. Victor Hale sat in the judge's chair again, arms folded, face a stony mask of annoyance. He clearly didn't want to be there, but even he couldn't deny the public outcry. The hall was packed, the atmosphere electric and expectant. Reporters lined the back, broadcasting live. Ella walked onto the stage once more. This time, there was no mockery. The crowd went silent in respect. She paused at the piano, fingers brushing its surface like greeting an old friend. Lena was in the front row, eyes shining with fierce encouragement. Ella inhaled deeply, grounding herself. Then she began to play. The first piece was flawless, delicate, emotional, yet powerful, every note ringing with clarity. The audience barely breathed, spellbound. When she finished, there was a heartbeat of silence before applause thundered through the hall. But Ella didn't stop there. She nodded once, repositioned her hands, and launched into a second piece, bolder, more daring, overflowing with soul and defiance. By the time she finished, the entire hall was on its feet, clapping, cheering, whistling. Even Victor couldn't hide it, his eyes were wet, and he wiped them quickly, scowling as if angry at his own reaction. Ella turned her sightless eyes toward the crowd, listening to the roar of their approval, feeling their standing ovation vibrate through the floor beneath her feet. For the first time, she felt something stronger than fear or shame. She felt victorious, not because she had won over the judges, but because she had stayed true to herself. Kindness and courage had transformed mockery into triumph, and the world had finally seen her as she truly was: brilliant, resilient, unstoppable. The cheers still echoed as Ella stood beside the piano, breathing hard, tears shining on her cheeks. Reporters pushed forward, cameras flashing. But before answering a single question, she turned to the front row where Lena was standing, hands pressed to her mouth in awe. Ella smiled tremulously. She lifted her hand, beckoning her. Lena hesitated only a moment before rushing up onto the stage. Without caring about the audience or the cameras, Ella wrapped her arms around her friend in a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered against her shoulder. "None of this would have happened without you." When they finally parted, microphones immediately swung toward Ella. One reporter shouted above the noise, "Ella, now that the world knows your talent, what's next for you?" Ella rested her hand on the piano, her sightless eyes bright with certainty. Her voice rang clear, "I want to teach blind kids to play music. No one should be told they can't. Everyone deserves the chance to be heard." There was a hush, then a ripple of applause even before she finished. Cameras clicked. Journalists scribbled furiously. Out of the corner of her hearing, Ella noticed someone approaching. She turned toward the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. Victor Hale stood there, no longer smug, no longer dismissive. He looked smaller somehow, humbled. He cleared his throat, voice rough. "Ella," he said quietly, so only she and Lena could really hear. "I was wrong. Truly." She didn't speak immediately. Then she lifted her chin and held out her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Victor took it and shook it firmly. Around them, the hall seemed to soften, the energy warming. Finally, Ella turned away from the cameras and reporters. She tapped her cane once, then began walking toward the wings of the stage, her steps measured, graceful, strong. Lena walked beside her, a protective, proud presence. Behind them, the audience began to chant her name, louder and louder until it thundered through the hall. "Ella! Ella!" And as they disappeared backstage, her head held high, the message was clear: kindness and belief had turned cruelty into triumph. In that moment, it felt undeniable that everyone, no matter who they were, deserved a chance to shine.